All right. I know that people are still coming in, but I'm going to get started so I can be timely. I will say that I've loved being in Sydney. Before this trip, I had not been to Sydney since 1999. I mean, there are people who weren't even born when I was last here in the room. But I really hope that there's not another 25 years between this trip and my next return to Sydney. But that being said, I do have to catch the train right after this to go catch my flight. And so I typically like to do Q&A after. I'm just going to give the presentation and then save time for Q&A at the next go. But you can always find me on Twitter. I'm really easy to find, so I would love to connect with everyone. This is a talk about stress and burnout, how to mitigate the former and hopefully to avoid the latter. I've been in technology for over 25 years, and so I've been burned out many times. And so this is a talk that I created to help people like me who have gotten into burnout or are on the verge of burnout, and how we can have strategies to reduce the chance of becoming burned out. And I want to also give a shout out to my wife, Dr. Simmons. I was got to say the doctor, Dr. Simmons, my wife. She has a PhD. She's a brilliant person. We wrote this talk together, and we've given it at a lot of places. She could not make this trip, but I cannot wait to give this talk with her again sometime in the future. And so, Aneika, if you see this, I hope I do good. So yeah, thanks for running this talk with me. And, you know, we work in an industry that's so exciting. I think if you're like me, you got into technology because it's just cool to make things out of ones and zeros. And we had this mythology of the industry being a place where people in a garage who worked hard and wrote code created what are now multi-billion-dollar industries. And so the media talks about technology, and a lot of the big companies in the world, some of the biggest companies in the world, multi-billion-dollar companies, or even richer, are software companies. And so there's a lot of glamour, there's a lot of shine put on working in this industry. But there is a dark side to working in technology that a lot of people don't talk about. And it's really surprising when I say this to a lot of people, because people think, well, you're a software developer. You work inside in an air-conditioned room with a $3,000 chair and maybe even a more expensive keyboard. And what kind of labor is that? And you think about the people who maybe even built this room where there is flooring and light fixtures and drywall and maybe steel and brick, and you can imagine the physical stress of doing that. You don't have that when you're building software. But our industry is changing and it is becoming better, but there is still a lot of stress in working in this industry. We work in an industry that's always changing. The frameworks and the languages and the products that I built back in the late 90s when I started my career, they don't even exist anymore. And so every almost quarter, at least, of my career, I've had to learn new technologies, new ways of doing things. There were no containers when I was starting my career. We used virtual machines and we used different technologies. There are whole languages that run the internet that did not exist when I started my career. And that ever-present need to just keep up, that's so exhausting, because you're always afraid that you're gonna fall behind, that you won't be able to cut it with the new thing that's coming out. And then there is the idea of always be shipping. Has anyone heard this term, always be shipping? I've used this term with my teams before to communicate that if we're always shipping software, if we're always getting those releases to production, then we're proving our value to the customers. That if we have a productive team that has a really strong release cadence, then we're making sure that the company understands that we're valuable, that we're the team to keep around when hard times come. But the sad reality is that anything that is always on will fail. No system can go on forever without breaking down. And we're the same thing. And the danger of burnout, the danger of having this always on mentality, is that burned out people burn down things. They burn down culture by becoming hostile and argumentative and starting fights. They even burn down some of the standards of your team. You'll often see people who are burn down communication. You'll see people who used to engage in Slack, are in teams, are in team conversations, become withdrawn and quiet. And these have the impacts of actually slowing down your team's ability to execute. There are very, very real costs to burnout. So I'm going to go through some of those costs, but then we're going to talk about solutions. Now, I call this burning down burnout because I took this from a Burndown chart. Has anyone used a Burndown chart before? Yeah, it's a pretty common tool. But for those of you who may not understand what a Burndown chart is, it's really, really simple. You have the x-axis, which is time, and the y-axis, which is effort or work. And so the idea is that when you start a time increment, and we normally call them sprints, usually 2 weeks, you want to take this work and you want to burn it down, right? So this represents the ideal line, right? The ideal line is a line that if you get the same number of usually story points done every day, then by the end of the sprint, you should be down to 0. So throughout the course of that 2-week period, you're hopefully burning down the work. You're getting less work that remains to be done. And as I went through my career, and I've been a Scrum Master for many companies. I am an Eng manager at GitHub today. I've had to look at a lot of burnout charts because I use them as a guide to understand how my team was doing. But over time, I realized that I needed to do more than just burn down work. I actually had to burn down things that were hurting me. I had to burn down things that were hurting my teams, and I had to find a better way to work. And so my wife and I began to look at the burnout problem. Like how widespread is burnout? Is it something that only a few people go through, or is it something that really is a pernicious part of software development? So a couple of stats. First, let's define burnout. This is a long set of text that I'm not going to read through, but this is the actual definition of burnout. And I'm just going to call out some of the words in that phrase. It's a prolonged response. That means that it goes on for a while. To chronic interpersonal stressors. Stressors are the thing that cause you to experience stress. And there are 3 key dimensions. I'm going to go through these dimensions later, but my wife and I summarize burnout this way. It is the ongoing feeling that today's resources are not enough to meet tomorrow's demands. Has anyone been there? I know I've been there, where it's like, I got more that I can't do what I need to do today, let alone tomorrow. That is burnout. And when you think about those 3 dimensions of burnout, I'm going to go through them, give you a brief example of each one. But the first one is emotional exhaustion. And this is not you've been running for miles or you haven't got enough sleep, that type of exhaustion. You could be fully rested. You could have gotten massive amounts of sleep and still be emotionally exhausted. It's the feeling that I have nothing left to give. I have been on projects where I've had to travel, where I've gotten a great night's sleep, and I wake up in my hotel room and I'm like, I just don't think I can get out of bed because I'm just so exhausted from the stress that I'm going through. So that's the first dimension. The second dimension is depersonalization. That's when you no longer see people as people. You begin to unpeople people. That's when you're working on a team, and instead of seeing your team as your fellow humans working together, you see them as problems. Oh, this is the person that hasn't reviewed my pull request yet. Come on, it's been 3 days. Or this is the person that took down production. They're a threat to our team. You begin to see people as threats to what you want to do. That happens when you're burned out. You begin to lose the sense of the shared humanity that we all have. And the final dimension of burnout is reduced personal accomplishment. That's when even the things that used to bring you joy, even the things that you love to do, no longer gives you any meaning or significance. You used to get a lot of joy after getting, hey, I landed for pull requests. I'm getting things done. I wrote this spec that was perfect, but you feel unsatisfied. So things that used to bring you a lot of satisfaction no longer satisfy you. It can be things like going to your favorite restaurant and ordering your favorite dish and you're eating it and it tastes like mush because you can't even enjoy the simple act of eating a good meal. These are the three dimensions of burnout. Now, let's go into some of the data. There was a poll by Gallup. Gallup is a very well-known research firm in the States, and they found that when they polled full-time workers, 23% said they felt burned out very often or always. And then 44% said they felt burned out sometimes. So over 60% of the respondents said, yes, I feel burnout. And I could go through lots of data to show that this is a very widespread issue, especially in software development. And then we get into the cost of burnout. There was a survey that showed that $190 billion of money is spent each year on stress. And this means that these are people who are not be able to go to work because they're too sick or they're too tired. These are people who are hospitalized. These are people who even die. Stress can be fatal. And so there's a real cost both to individuals and to corporations when it comes to burnout. Now, I want to talk more about this health issue because I want to make sure that people understand that burnout has symptoms that include fatigue, high blood pressure, psychological distress. People become irritable. They can become angry. People can have their sick days go up. And I've had people as a manager who I see start to get sick. And it's like, oh, I'm feeling sick. I got to go home early. And then a few days later, oh, I got to take a day off. And then a few days later, I'm out for a week. And I almost always say, hey, take the time off. It's better to get ahead of this than to try to fight through it. And I've had people ignore me, and then they eventually are out for a long time, and they're like, oh, yeah, I should have listened to you. And so I've seen people, due to burnout, due to stress, miss out on work. So since burnout is a common problem, there are common solutions. And I'm gonna go through some of the individual solutions that people try to do to combat burnout. And then I'm gonna go through some of the corporate solutions. And then I'm gonna show how each of these are lacking in some way, and then go through the framework that my wife and I came up with. All right, a common corporate solution is to give plush toys to employees. You may have people come in and do yoga in the yard. You may have beer on tap in the break room. You may have a game room with all the games that you could ever want to play, like ping pong or maybe pool. And so you see that corporations often try to outfit their offices with things to help their employees feel more at home in the hopes that they feel better. And again, I've walked into major offices of major corporations and I've seen the plushness. But the sad fact is that sometimes all of these things can feel like the red wedding at Game of Thrones. So that no matter how elaborate or how plush it is, these are not going to help people when they're dealing with burnout. And also during the times when the economy goes down, often the first thing that gets cut are these programs. So I understand that corporations are well-meaning, but often it's not enough to address the problem. So what do people do? Well, people, and my wife loves this picture because, they're running on the beach, and she didn't understand why they're wearing boots at the beach, but I don't know, maybe they didn't want sand in their shoes. But people do escapism. They're like, okay, I'm going to plan this 3-week vacation. I'm going to go to some exotic location. I'm going to spend all this time at the beach. Maybe I'm going to go on a ski trip. I'm going to go on a walkabout. I'm going to do all these things to try to escape work. But the reality is that no matter how far you try to escape, when you come back, usually the problems are still there. And so escapism, we find, is often not sufficient to address burnout. So we needed a plan. We needed something that would help individuals in ways that corporations cannot do, and the way that individuals in our normal way to solution this often find lacking. So we came up with a very simple framework that we've implemented in our lives. My wife is a very busy college professor. I work at a leading technology GitHub. And so like we have complicated lives, right? Again, we'll make 22 years of marriage next month. We have 3 teenagers. Our oldest is in college. We got a lot going on. And so we had to find a way to manage the stress in our life. So this framework is really based a lot of ways in concepts that most of us understand. Most of the work that we do runs in data centers. Maybe you don't own a data center, but it's a data center owned by someone. And so you may, connect to it via the cloud. But one of the things that we talk about with data centers is availability, right? And we have like 3 nines and 4 nines, and we have ways of measuring how available these data centers are. And in many ways, finding burnout is increasing your availability. It's increasing your ability to be available to your job and also to be available to the people who you care about. And so as I go through each part of the framework, I'm going to describe it, but then I'm going to also try to use some analogy of like a server to help explain each part. All right. So we have this 3-part framework that I'm going to walk through, and I'm going to, again, explain what it is and hopefully go to a way that hopefully makes it land. So when you think about a server, we think about server health, right? A lot of us have servers maybe under our desk, or maybe you connect to a server through your computer, maybe you SSH that server. And so when you have a server, you have to manage several things, right? Servers get hot, so you have to manage the heat of the servers. Servers consume memory and disk space. You have to manage it. If you were in Scott's session this morning, he showed you his MacBook and how you can see the GPU and you can see the NPU and all these things consuming resources. And the problem is that if you don't adequately manage the resources on your computer, you're going to see them slow down and you're going to eventually crash. And our bodies are similar. If we don't manage ourselves, then we're going to go on a journey towards a crash. So the first thing that we need to burn down is burning down illness. Now, we may be brilliant and we may be accomplished, but we're all in human bodies that have organs and skin and tissue. And so it's very important that we don't forget that your body's going to win. You may have a deadline, your boss may be nagging you, you may feel like you're behind, but you still live inside a body. And the issues that often when we're working software development, we'll trade our health for productivity. And we'll do that over and over again until we consume our own health. It's like the old saying that says, young people spend health to get wealth, and then old people spend wealth to get their health back. And so we don't want to do that. We want to avoid that because burnout has a physical toll on ourselves. But in many ways, studies have shown that if you improve your health, you improve your ability to withstand stress. And it's just important to do things that probably your mother, your father, or maybe your guardian told you, is that you have to get regular exercise. You have to improve what you eat. And companies can do a lot of things in this area. And companies often try to bring healthy snacks to the office, or maybe they give you money for your home office to have healthier options. But it's really important that we try to make sure that we do more than just what companies can do, right? Companies can do a lot, but if there's one thing I want you to take away from this part of the framework is sleep. My wife and I have done a lot to upgrade our sleep. How many of you feel that you get adequate sleep? All right, I can almost count the hands, maybe 5 people in a room with a lot more than 5 people in it. So I'm like you. I used to just neglect my sleep. I would very much have days when I would get 3 hours of sleep each night because I was busy. And I found that was so hard on me. And so my wife and I have done a lot. We have a fan in our bedroom that we run to just have white noise. We have a weighted blanket that we use to help kind of with our sleep. We turn the temperature down because it's found that about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius, so maybe someone can do that calculation. But at about 65 degrees Fahrenheit is a great temperature for optimizing sleep. And so we do a lot of things. And so I've seen the difference. Like, I almost feel like a different person when I get better sleep. I think more clearly. I'm less grumpy when I get enough sleep. So it's a very simple thing, but that's the one thing I would say in this area that we can do to improve our sleep. And I want to just really summarize this. We can all be healthier versions of ourselves. When I initially started giving this talk, I had people come up to me afterwards and say, hey, I have a chronic condition that I know is going to gradually weaken me. There's nothing I can do about it. I cannot eat enough salads or tofu. There's no amount of water that I can drink to fix my health issue because it's chronic. And so I totally get that. And I have a massive amount of sympathy for people with chronic health issues. But what I'm trying to say is that we can all be healthier versions of ourselves. None of us are probably going to become bodybuilders and perfect specimens of health, but we can always do more to improve how we sleep, how we move around, how much water we consume. We can all be healthier versions of ourselves. And if we make these investments in our health, we will also be investing in the people we work with. We'll be investing in the people who we come home and be around. I know that I have, over my 25 plus years, often come home, working from home now, walking out of my office, just totally wrecked. Just totally no energy. I might walk in and give my wife a kiss on the cheek and, high five the kids, and I'm going to go to bed. And so I realized that I'm not being the husband that I want to be. I'm not being the father that I want to be, acting this way. And so when I invested in getting better sleep, I was better at work to the people I work with, but more importantly, I was better to the people at home. All right, going back to the server analogy. Now, when you have a data set and you have, each individual servers that do certain things, so they have power that they can do, but it's not unusual to specialize. To say, okay, this server is going to be a database server, and this server is a web server, and this server manages network, and you specialize the servers in order to optimize what you do with them, right? Well, in a lot of ways, we have to specialize what we do through our focus. And the second part of this framework is after and they're not really sequential, but the first part was burning down illness. We need to burn down distractions. We all have a finite amount of attention. And it's really important that we understand this because we often think that, okay, I can focus on this. I can write code and watch Netflix in the background and make my list of what I'm going to cook for dinner tonight. And I can do all this multitasking. But studies have shown that multitasking is a myth. You do less when you multitask. It's really more important to focus on the task at hand and give it your full focus. So your attention is almost like if you fill a bucket with water at the beginning of the day, as you go throughout the day, you're reducing the amount of water in that bucket. And so what you often do is that you waste your attention on things that don't really matter. Maybe you have someone interrupting the work that you're doing to ask you to do something else. Or you are just scrolling Twitter to take a break from work, which often, taking a walk would be better, by the way. Or you're doing all these things, but you're not harnessing the attention that you have for the day. And by doing that, you're losing the ability to maximize what you do for the things that really matter. And so it's really important that as you go throughout your day, you have to figure out, okay, what's the most valuable things I can put my limited attention on? And then you put your attention on those things. And what that means is that you have to make a values judgment every day. And these are things based on what's core to you. What are your values when it comes to your health? What are your values when it comes to your relationships? What are values when it comes to your personal goals, your professional goals? And like, don't go throughout the day burning your attention on things that don't even matter. And it's really easy to do this because we live in a society where we're really socialized to say yes to things that people come to us with. And I mentioned this in my talk, my first talk at this conference. I'm going to go over the same slide because I really think that we need to kind of break away this. I'm going to get to this. But when you say yes to everything, you're really saying no to a lot of things. We're going to talk more about this. But I just want to go back to the fact that your attention is an expression of your values. And it's very important that you align what you put your attention on with what's valuable to you. And so it's really important that you make time in your day for deep focus. Put it in your calendar, block it off, and say, these are the blocks of time in my calendar that are do not disturb, where I'm doing deep work and I'm maximizing the attention that I need to give to what's really, really valuable. Make it visible to your colleagues and put into your work calendar that these are like do not disturb days. You can even be kinder about it and say, like, ask before scheduling over this block of time. And when I see that, when I see people do that, when I do that, I'm also communicating that my attention is important to me. And that's the value that I think that you need to radiate throughout your company. You can do it through your company calendar. All right, so let's talk about saying no, because saying no is the most powerful tool that we have for making sure that we don't get waylaid by distractions. So again, this is the same slide. So if you came to my talk yesterday, you've already seen this. I got a little bit more time though, so I'm going to take a little bit more time on this slide to go through it. Again, we are socialized in at least Western culture to say yes. We feel that when people come to us with a request, that it's like, oh yeah, you value me. I'm feeling good. You chose me to do this thing. But often what we don't realize is that people are choosing us to do something that doesn't align with what's valuable. And so it's really important that we learn how to say no. It's 2 letters, but it's so powerful. Now, how can we say no? Well, I'm going to give you a few examples of how to say no. So the first thing that you can say is, hey, I have a lot on my plate now. You're making a no based on your workload. So you're forcing the person coming to you with this request to say, do they respect your workload or do they not, right? So you're almost Jedi mind tricking the request into a opportunity for them to interrogate what they value. And so by saying this, you're able to say, here are things that I'm working on, and it's more than I really can do right now, and you're adding to this workload. Now, I will say, though, that if you do use this form of no, it's very important that you can accurately say what you're working on. And that could just be like a list that you use, or maybe it's a Notion or whatever tool that you just, but it's very important that you can, because people often ask, well, what are you working on? And then you're like, and then, you have to kind of, alt tab away from Twitter. So it's really important that you are able to defend what you're working on, but just say, hey, my workload right now is a little bit too heavy. The other way that you can say no is to say, focus, right? Hey, I've dedicated myself to improving X, and I need to focus on that. And X can be anything. Maybe you're learning another language. Maybe you're working on going for a jog during lunch to improve your personal health. Or it could be whatever else is valuable to you, but you're saying that, okay, you're asking me to compromise my personal integrity with myself by making this request. Do you respect me enough to honor my personal integrity to understand that's why I cannot fulfill this request? And then the person has to let you know, do they respect your personal integrity or not? All right, so there's focus. The other way is impact. You can say, oh, you know what? I understand you want me to do this. This is going to actually push out all the other things that you have me working on. Do you want to do that? And so you're making the argument and you're forcing the person asking you to do something Do they value the things that you're already working on? The things that often they've asked you to do, right? Because when people ask you to do things, they're not thinking about the other 10 things that they asked you to do in the past week. They're just thinking about that one item. So you're giving them context for the impact of their requests. Then there's my favorite way to say no. It's from chess. It's castling. It's saying, oh, you want me to do this? Well, I cannot do this, but I can do that. And so you can frame your answer in a way that is conducive to your workload and what you want to focus on, right? So that's one way of saying no, is say, okay, I cannot write this report, but I can write a summary and get it to you by the end of the day, right? So there are different ways that you can do that. The other way is to make the argument about polish, meaning that, oh, you want me to do that? Well, I just don't think I will be able to do that with the level of quality that I like to put into my work and that you deserve to have. So you're forcing them to make a judgment call on quality. And do they really care about quality, right? So these are all ways of saying no that I think are actually kind and reasonable. And so you're able to make sure that you're able to say no to things that are not allowed with what's valuable to you and maximizing the attention that you can give to the things that really move the needle. Does this make sense? Yeah? All right, so nodding heads. Okay. I will caution you, though, that you cannot be the person who always says no to everything. So I just, we need to use common sense in these things. You cannot say no to everything, but I would make the argument that you can probably say no to most things if you have a very strong sense of what you're working on and the value that it brings to you. All right. And if I can summarize this part of the framework, it's this. Saying no helps you say yes. All right, so we go back to the server analogy, right? So servers do load balancing, right? Load balancing means that you distribute requests that come to the server so that no servers goes down because it has too many requests sent its way. So there's like round robin load balancing. You can load balance based on like how busy the server is, based on CPU usage, based on data load. So there's a lot of ways that you can load balance a server. And the fact is that by load balancing a server, you're spreading the load, and that makes the entire system work better. And we need to spread the load ourselves. And then we do that by people. And so the final part of the framework is that we have to burn down barriers. Now, I am a classic introvert. I love people, but people drain me. I said this yesterday. I love people, but people drain me. I am not a natural person that attracts like 20 or 30 friends. I know people who have a lot of friends, but like I might have one or two really good friends, but I'm not like going to be, I don't have like this entourage following me around. And so I often felt for a while that being an introvert meant that I really don't need relationships. Like I'm the kind of person that if you left me to my own devices and you give me enough books to read, I'm good for like weeks. I could be by myself for weeks with a good book and just chilling. I am good, but I'm not really good because as human beings, we're made for connection. We're made for other people. And if you're an introvert like me, this is probably hard to accept, but introverts need people too. Relationships lubricate stress. By having tight connections, you're able to go through life better able to withstand the slings and arrows of life. And again, I know that it's hard for introverts especially to understand, but there are people who are even highly accomplished people. So you think that your accomplishments make you immune from needing people. Well, you need people too. There's the old adage that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We need to go together in order to make it around. And we looked into burnout and all the things that hurt. And we talked about this in the pre-discussion before the session. When you study people who are getting older, the people who are isolated usually don't age as well as the people who have social connections, either social connections with children or friends or just people who live close to them. These things help you age better. But it's not just about getting old. It's about being a fully minted human. We thrive in relationships. And so there are certain things that we need to do to make sure that we can spread the load of life throughout through our social network. Not the websites, but the people who we are that we are linked with. One of the things that I always try to encourage people to do to really make this real is that we need to meet with people in person. Studies have shown that, and this is why sites like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram often make people feel like alone. Like we have more connections than we've ever had, and so many people feel more alone than they've ever felt. And so your brain is wired to be in the same space with someone, meaning that when you interact with someone over Facebook or Twitter or whatever, your brain doesn't see that as an actual real connection. It's only when you're in the same space that you feel that you're actually having a relationship. You're actually having a human-to-human interaction. And so it's really important to take some time to spend time with other people, like in real life, in the same space. And I know during the pandemic, that was very difficult, but it's really important that we are able to connect. And so I highly encourage everyone to get out. And again, I'm an introvert, so this is hard for me to do. But thankfully, my wife is very good at arranging like date nights with other couples and all these connections, because this is really important for feeling that you're connected with other people, which is highly, highly valuable for avoiding burnout. And I want to just kind of leave it with this. Resilience requires relationships. If you want to have resilience, if you want to be able to take the stress of life, we talked right before I started this talk about someone who lost a spouse. If we want to be able to deal with like the loss of life, or the loss of a job, or the loss of a dream, and these things happen to people. There's many things in my life that I've wanted that I have not gotten, and it's being able to have people to talk about it, to be able to talk through that. That's helped me to go through those times in my life. All right, when we started this talk, we talked about the Burndown chart, and we have this concept of the ideal line, and that ideal line represents perfection. Because if you perfectly burn down the work throughout the course of the sprint, that means you're getting down to zero. And I really focus on this ideal line, right? Because it was a way to judge, are we behind? Are we in front of the schedule, right? And if we're behind, where can I make corrections? But I realize that often there's like a tolerance that my team has, meaning that if like on day 3 of the sprint, we're a little bit behind, I know that we can catch up. And so that means that we cannot focus on the perfection of avoiding burnout. You can get burned out trying to avoid burnout. And so I really hope that this framework that I shared makes sense and that people can feel that it can be something they can operate. But it's really more about practice than perfection. I'm sharing with you a very lightweight framework that's worked for me, but it's not meant to be a pair of handcuffs I'm installing on you. I'm not going to say, oh, you need to go to the gym, or you need to meet with that person, or you need to tune out the distractions. No, having these practices in place are meant to help you navigate life in a healthy way. It's not meant to force you into some kind of framework. And so what I really encourage you to do is to use the sprint idea of a retrospective. Have you ever done that? Like a sprint retros? Okay. A sprint retro, for those of you who don't know, is that every now and then the team pauses to inspect ourselves, to see what's working well, what's not working well, what can be made better. And that's a great personal thing to do. And so I have in my calendar a regular meeting with myself where I look at, how am I doing with my relationships? How am I doing with my, physical goals, with my health goals? How am I doing with being focused? And by checking in with yourself, you're able to make corrections. You're able to say, okay, I haven't been able to connect with someone in person in a long time. Let me schedule some activity in order to get that to where I need it to be. So I want to go through the topic of, I've given you this framework, but people say, hey, I don't have a lot of access to like a gym, or maybe I live somewhere where it's hard to get to like healthy food options. So what can I do to use this framework where there's scarcity? What can I do to use this framework when either because of the economic situation or my geographic where I live, what can I do to really use this framework? So I have a couple of examples of really lightweight ways to use this framework. So like volunteer. Anyone volunteer in here? Right? Okay, just a few people. I have found that volunteering is an amazing way to form human connections, right? Again, being an introvert, I normally don't seek out people, but I'll seek out causes. I'll seek out things that really bring me a sense of like relief or satisfaction is a better word for like what I'm doing in the world. I've been very fortunate. I work in software. It's an industry that is recession resistant to a certain degree. It's an industry where we typically are paid more than other parts of the economy. And so I do feel a need to give back. And so I have time where I volunteer. And when you volunteer, the benefit of this is that usually there's low or no cost to you, and you're able to connect with people who are like you, who believe in the cause that you're volunteering for. So volunteering is a way for you to very kind of have a cheat code for connecting with other human beings. So I highly recommend people try volunteering. You're not only doing something for people who are often less fortunate, but you're doing something that will help you. So volunteering is a very lightweight way to use this framework. All right, what else can we do? Well, journaling. Journaling is, again, a lightweight tool. You only need a writing implement and usually a piece of paper, or you may be able to use like the Notepad app on your computer or the Notes app on your phone. I do recommend writing out, though, your journal. There's some studies have shown that physically writing, helps with like retention, helps with you to actually be engaged with what you're doing. I use an app on my iPad and the Apple Pencil for my journal. And so the power of journaling is that you're getting things out of your head. And by getting it out of your head, then you usually don't think about it as much. The stress of that goes down. And another great thing about journaling is that I have, again, an iPad journal, but I have paper journals going back decades. And when I go through those journals, I find that almost everything that I was worried about when I wrote that entry, it turns out like it wasn't even, it was like a big no-op. Like nothing happened. It just didn't happen. And by having that record of things that bothered me, like literally like contemporaneous in real time, when I wrote this 13 years ago, what I was writing about seemed like the worst thing in the world. But in hindsight, nothing happened. And so by having those experiences to look back on, you're like, the things that I'm worried about are probably no ops too. And so you usually feel a little bit better about dealing with those issues. All right, the last thing. Again, I am a very big, and as I turn 50, I'm turning 50 this year, I'm really getting into my health. I'm really getting into, okay, this body that I've not been nice to for most of my life, to be honest. I mean, I used to drink I still drink caffeine, but oh my goodness, Red Bulls and horrible amounts of caffeine and not getting enough sleep. So I'm like, okay, let me kind of really focus on my health. But I understand that like it can be hard, right? It's hard to like even going to the gym. I find that like going to the gym is the hardest part of working out, right? Once I'm there, it's like, oh, I'm glad that I did this. But it's before you get there. It's like, I got to find my gym clothes and I got to get dressed and I got to get into the car and then I got to drive to the gym and find a parking space. Like that's the part that gets you down. So I understand that going to the gym is not an option for everyone, but I hope that going for a walk is in reach. My wife and I go for a walk. We're in the same city, so we haven't done it this week. But my wife and I go for a walk almost every day. And it's a way for us to connect with each other, right? To get that human interaction. We catch up on our day. We talk about the next day. We get a little bit of a sweat going on. And it's just a way to just have very low cost way for us to really connect and to be able to also work on our health. So again, this framework is meant to be lightweight, but it's a way for us to harness our health, harness our attention and harness our relationships. And by doing that, you'll be able to better weather stress and avoid burnout. And I just want to say that I'm here with you. So please reach out to me on social media and reach out to me if you say, hey, your friend, is it working yet? And I'm like, okay, tell me more about what's going on. Now, I want to close with a couple of frequently asked questions that I get after this talk, because I won't be able to do Q&A today, but I'm going to go over some of the questions that often come up when I give this talk. And I've stood after this talk and answered these questions over and over again. So I have a pretty good sense of what people are probably thinking, like, that's a cool talk, but like, what about this? So the first question that people ask is, what do you do when you have a boss that doesn't care about burnout? So you can say all these cute ways to say no. You can do all these things about going for a walk. You can have all these things, but like my boss is like, we need the work done. And if you're not going to get done, I will find someone else who will, right? So I am very sympathetic to this. So it's very real. So I don't want to be dismissive. I don't want to be too cute with how I answer this. So first, I've had bad bosses over my career. I'm very lucky to not have one now. I haven't had one for a while, but I've had those bosses where very much it was like, you are a disposable resource. You are a cog that's easily replaced at the cog factory. And so I have been there. So my sympathies to anyone in this room that's going through that. My answer to this question is, after I say I have really a lot of sympathy for that, is that if your boss is a person that doesn't care about burnout, it's really important when you can to find a community of people at the company that care about burnout. They are ideally on your team. If not on your team, they're on other teams in the company. And you can find a community of people who you can talk about this stuff. You can say, hey, we're going to go after we figure out how to get the work where it needs to be for a walk during lunch, or we're going to read a book about how we can get better at our attention or whatever. But I find that having a community that is thriving and that is connected is a really great way to manage your stress when your boss is honestly just a tyrant, right? I've been very lucky in the instances where I've had a boss that didn't care about me to find colleagues who cared about me and we cared about each other. And so you have to form your network that way. And like, you'd be surprised how finding people to be in health with and to be in just human with can start to spread. And sometimes that goes upward. It's rare, but that can go upward. So that's my answer to that question. The other question that I often get when I give this talk is, what do you do when you have a colleague who's burned out? You're not burned out, but you have a colleague who's burned out. It's obvious to you that this person is really struggling. Well, my first advice is to don't ever diagnose burnout. Right? It is something that a medical, psychological professional needs to do. None of us are qualified to diagnose someone as being burned out. So I would highly recommend, don't lead with, hey, you seem burned out. What's going on? Right? A lot of people will find that to be offensive. A lot of people may complain about that. So I would say, my first bit of advice is don't do that. What I would say that you should do, and it depends on the relationship of the person who you see is burned out. But if you have a decent relationship, you can lead with observations, right? Like, hey, I've noticed that you're almost always like on time to the Zoom meetings, right? Whenever I join a Zoom meeting, like I think I'm getting there early. Like you're always there. And I've noticed lately that you're joining 5 minutes late. Like, the past few times you've been joining 5 minutes late. Can you help me understand what's going on? Or you might have someone who is almost always very even-keeled, always calm to the people, who never get into any fight. They always seem like they're just totally unbothered. But then they start being cranky, they start being combative. That change is something that you can say, hey, and again, you have to be very careful in doing this, but I've noticed this, that you used to be this way, but you seem to be doing this now. I just want to know, because I care about you, what's going on. And so you give them the opportunity to, if they're willing, to share with you what's going on. There you can begin to go into, well, how are things going with maybe other parts of your life, and you can begin to maybe give them some suggestions that have worked for you. But that's what I've done in my career in order to help people who I know clearly are burned out. Now, the key part that has to be in place is that you have to understand what's the normal profile of the people who I work with. What are they normally like, right? And so you have to be willing to pay attention to the humans you're working around and understand what's normal for them, because over time, and it takes months often to kind of get there, but you're beginning to realize, okay, this is not normal for this person. And then you can begin to talk to them about what you've observed. And then again, this is not something that you do like the first time and the second time, but if you have the relationship there, you can begin to help them understand some practices that can help them. All right, so the last example that I'm going to give you of a frequently asked question that I get is, what happens if, like, I'm the manager, I'm the leader, and I'm burned out, right? I'm the one who's supposed to be, like, always on, always there. People depend on me every day, and I'm burned out. Like, what do I do? So my first answer is a little bit harsh, and that's like, everyone's replaceable, dude. I mean, yeah, you are the manager, you're important, you may have a title, but like, if you left today, they'll have someone probably by early next week, just to be honest. I may not say that harsh, it depends on the person. And so because we're all replaceable, then we have to understand that, like, you're putting a lot of value on something that doesn't probably value the same way. And so you have to realize that to be your best self, you have to be your best self when it comes to health, when it comes to how you manage stress, when it comes to what you focus on. So you have to understand that even if you're the rock of the team, even rocks need breaks. Rocks need self-care. Rocks need time. Rocks need to recharge. Rocks need relationships. And so you begin to help understand that you need to unburden yourself from perfection and realize your humanity and invest in that. So those are the questions that I typically get that I wanted to share with you. I really enjoy your attention. Thanks for coming to my talk. And I hope you enjoy the rest of NDC. Thanks, everybody.